Blender has been my breadwinner for the last few years, and it has allowed me to do so much. In 2024, I wanted to be more structured and give it my best, and I tried, but I'm also a procrastinating father, so I didn't do as much as I wanted, but what I managed to do, I gave it my best, and I'm proud of it. So let's do our channel recap of 2024. I really focused in on geometry nodes and I made a bunch of videos. So let's start with those. Starting with the digital dissolve tutorial. This is a combination of lighting, materials, and geometry nodes. While the effect is done in geometry nodes, that's the easy part. The hard part is getting the digital effect to look good, and it was just a matter of playing with some lights and materials. The tutorial and the project file are also available. All links are going to be in the description. I followed that up with a fracturing effect where I show how to make procedural fractures. For example, if you want a heavy dinosaur roaming the streets where every step it takes cracks and breaks the pavement, leaving a trail of damage on its way. And the project file is also still on Gumroad. Then after watching the new Matrix movie, which I think was released in 2023, I can't remember, I was inspired to make the Matrix effect inside Blender using geometry nodes. It was also around this time that the Unreal Engine Matrix demo was released, so there was a lot of inspiration to draw from. In the same year, I really got into motion graphics for commercials and I enjoyed this a lot, so I created a few tutorials around creating ads inside Blender. I would go on Behance and Pinterest to find some inspiration that I could turn into animated posters using Blender. It was also around this time that I collaborated with Game Dev TV and Grant Abbitt to create a Blender course about creating commercials inside Blender, and it's available on the Game Dev website. I also started experimenting with VFX using geometry nodes. This was among my first tutorials about VFX using geometry nodes, and it was about fracturing and simulating gravity, which reminds me, there was supposed to be a geometry nodes branch that supported rigid body simulations. I don't know where that ended. I saw a number of demos about it on Twitter and YouTube, but I'm not sure if the Blender Foundation is still working on it. It was around this time that ChatGPT became also popular, so I played around with it to create a script that would make it easier to make RBD constraints that connected pieces to their nearest object, which made directing, activating, and breaking these constraints easier. So I ended up making a tutorial about it in an example of a skull disintegrating. I also made a few other tutorials around geometry nodes, and sometimes I would draw inspiration from Houdini, trying to recreate some of the effects that were done in Houdini inside Blender. It was also about this time that I collaborated with Grant Abbitt and Game Dev TV to create another course about VFX in Blender. We worked on it for about 5 months, making sure that to cover everything you need from fracturing, constraints, particle systems, oceans, projectiles, rigging, rigid body simulations, smoke and fire simulations, and a lot more. The course is also available on the Game Dev TV website. Then I went back to my daily Blender tutorials, like this motion tracking tutorial, adding some 3D buildings inside this video. Then jumped back to geometry nodes to make this growing plant animation. I remember this was inspired by a Cinema 4D render I saw, and I knew it could be easily done in geometry nodes. So I created it and followed that up with a storm of other tutorials. And that's the good thing about doing something you love. Whether it's raining, hot outside, or feeling under the weather, I would always storm to the computer and make something, even when it felt like everything was spinning. So then I made a Procedural City in geometry nodes, which you can download for free. I also made a few improvements to it to make it more usable and in different styles. Then I got back to making commercials in Blender, making this beverage commercial. It involves quite a lot of things, like water simulations, particle simulations, and working with materials. I also tried out a different way of making commercials using a combination of geometry nodes, shape keys, rigid body simulations, smoke simulations, particle simulations, and a lot more. This tutorial involves quite a lot of effects, and I think it came out looking good. Then again, played with geometry nodes to make procedural destruction effects. This was before the for each loop was introduced to geometry nodes, so I was using the cell fracture add-on to fracture the pieces into smaller pieces, and then using geometry nodes to direct the destruction. But now with the for each zone, we can do the fracturing part all inside geometry nodes. I followed that with a Thanos Portal effect. I did a bunch of other scenes like this underwater scenes creating some fake caustics. I also made a procedure destructive logo reveal, made a creepy face that transformed into a flower, something that I saw on Pinterest, and I tried it in Blender. I think it came out looking good. I also made a traffic simulation tutorial, but this was more of an overview of the project file. If you want to check out the step-by-step tutorial, it's included in my Master Geometry Nodes course, which I released also in 2024, but we'll come back to that. I also made a procedure debris tool that lets you scatter debris near any walls, and I have this up on Gumroad. I also made the procedure assemble tool. It's amazing how easy this effect is and how powerful and versatile it is. You can use it for VFX effects like the Iron Man suit up effect that I also showed in this tutorial, but I also dedicate an entire section to this effect in the Master Geometry Nodes course that you can check out in the description. Around this time is when I also created the destroyed building generator. The plan was to make a tutorial of how to make a destroyed building, but the results were so good, so I decided to turn it into an actual product that I sell on Blender Market and Gumroad. I then followed that up with a debris pile tool that lets you pile debris on top of each other, especially if you're creating some abandoned warehouse, building, or even a city. Then I created a fluid reveal tutorial. I got this idea on Pinterest. I just love going around and finding challenging things to try. I then followed that up with the exploding models effect. This was after the for each loop was released, so I went back and recreated the fracturing effect, but this time using Geometry Nodes for the fracturing instead of self-fracture add-on. I was making a lot of Geometry Nodes videos around this time, but most of the comments were asking me to make them more detailed, step-by-step tutorials. But YouTube hates that. They want everything to be chop, really quick, MrBeast style. So I made the Master Geometry Nodes course that goes into detail about making anything in Geometry Nodes that you can check out in the description. After completing the course, I got a bit bored with Blender, so I went on to look for some harder challenges, and that's when I started to look into Houdini. Then I realized that actually Houdini was so much easier than Blender, and I had receipts to prove, so I created a few demonstrations and walkthroughs of how easy it is to use Houdini. The first one was this slug animation. I followed it up by creating a grain simulation that is basically impossible to do in Blender without using any add-ons. I knew that there would still be doubters, so I brought more receipts in the form of these worms just being pushed out of a box, something I saw in the first season of The Witcher. I've always wanted to recreate it, but it was simply impossible in Blender. So I tried it in Houdini, and unsurprisingly, it was so much easier. I'm working on a course for Blender artists who want to learn Houdini, but I'll be explaining it in terms of Blender. So if you want to catch that, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so that you get notified when I start that. I also went back to doing motion graphics. I did this mechanical thing effect, but I think this was this year, so I think we are coming to the end of what was done in 2024. And lastly, I did this sand simulation effect just as another receipt to prove that Blender is harder than Houdini. So if you already know how to use Blender, just be assured that Houdini is going to be much easier for you. So that was my 2024 recap. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video. All links to these videos are